Driving down Ocean Drive in Miami, I saw my fiancée kissing a guy in a red Ferrari. I got angry and crashed into them from behind. When she saw it was me, I was driving down Ocean Drive in Miami just after midnight. The air smelled like salt and money, that mix of ocean breeze and expensive perfume that always hangs over the strip. My windows were down, the engine low, and the radio murmuring something that barely registered. I'd just left a dinner with clients from a real estate firm who wanted a proposal by Monday. My head was half on the deal, half on Talia, my fiancée. She'd said she was having a quiet night with friends. Probably just wine and gossip, she told me earlier that day. She'd sounded distracted, but I didn't think much of it. Lately, she'd been like that, distant but polite, affectionate in a mechanical way. I chalked it up to wedding stress. We'd been engaged for 6 months, and most of the arguments we'd had were about flowers, venues, and her parents' endless expectations. Then I hit that red light near the Clevelander Hotel. The Ferrari caught my eye because it was so bright it looked unreal, like it belonged in a commercial. Red paint glinting under streetlights, top down, 2 people inside. The woman's hair was caught in the wind, long and dark, familiar. I remember thinking, no, assuming, that she just looked like Talia. But when the driver leaned over and kissed her, I saw her face in full light. It was her. Her head tilted the way it always did when she kissed me. Her hand was on his chest, her engagement ring catching the glow of the streetlight. Something snapped, not in an explosive way, not like in the movies. It was more like my brain went quiet, like it shut down the part that reasons and left only impulse. I hit the gas. My car slammed into the Ferrari's rear with a crunch that I felt in my ribs. The sound of glass breaking was sharp and short, like a scream cut off mid-breath. The airbag exploded into my face, and the car lurched forward again before stopping dead. For a few seconds, there was just the hiss of steam and music still playing faintly through the radio. My chest burned. My hands shook. When I forced the airbag aside, I saw her through the cracked windshield. Talia turned around slowly, her face pale under the streetlights. The man beside her, tall, broad, with short hair and that smug, athletic posture, got out first. He checked his car before even glancing at me. I stepped out too. My knees felt rubbery, but I stayed steady. A crowd was already forming. Tourists, club hoppers, a valet from across the street with his phone out. Talia climbed out next, barefoot now because one heel had snapped. She stared at me like she couldn't process who I was or why I was there. Then realization hit, and she looked almost afraid. The man, her companion, put a hand on her arm, whispering something low. I couldn't hear him over the chaos, but I didn't need to. I recognized the tone, possessive, calm, like he thought he was the one in control. Police sirens echoed somewhere close. I wanted to yell, ask her what the hell was going on. But when she looked at me, I saw that whatever we'd been had already ended before I'd even pressed the gas pedal. She didn't move toward me. She didn't apologize. She didn't even look shocked. Just cornered. An officer arrived, taking notes while another directed traffic. The Ferrari's rear bumper was shredded, mine was crushed, and coolant pooled beneath us. The officer asked what happened. I told him my brakes locked up. He looked skeptical but didn't push. Then he turned to Talia. She said it was fine, that no one was hurt, but she couldn't meet my eyes. The man introduced himself as Brent. Just Brent. The name landed like a punch. I remembered it then, the ex she used to mention in that nostalgic way people do when they want to sound over it. The one she claimed taught her what she didn't want. So that was him. He didn't look angry. He looked entertained, like he was watching a soap opera he'd accidentally become part of. When the officer asked if we needed a tow, I said yes. Brent declined. His car could still drive. He offered Talia his jacket, and she took it without hesitation. They talked quietly, and though I couldn't make out the words, I could read the energy, comfort, familiarity, intimacy. That jacket had more warmth in it than the entire last month of our engagement. My tow truck arrived. I stood beside my wrecked car while they exchanged numbers with the officer. When Talia finally walked over, she didn't apologize. She just asked if I was okay, her voice flat, like a nurse talking to a patient she didn't remember admitting. I said I was fine. I asked where she was headed. She said she needed to figure things out. Then Brent called her name, and she went. I stood there while they pulled away. The red Ferrari merged into traffic like nothing happened, its taillights shrinking until they disappeared. The cop looked at me, probably expecting a breakdown. Instead, I handed him my license and waited for the paperwork. I was calm, almost detached. Back home, I parked the wreck in the driveway. I didn't even turn on the lights when I walked in. Her purse was still on the kitchen counter. The house smelled faintly of her perfume and coconut lotion. On the coffee table, the wedding binders she'd made sat open, receipts, color swatches, notes about venues and menus. The engagement ring box was empty. I poured a drink I didn't taste. My hands still buzzed from the impact, but my head was clear. I wasn't angry anymore. I was curious. Curious how long this had been going on. Curious if her friends knew. Curious if I'd missed something obvious. Some sign that my fiancé had already replaced me before the wedding invitations were even printed. At around 3 a.m., I went through her phone. She'd left it charging on the nightstand, unlocked. The last messages were with someone labeled B. Dozens of texts, all from the past 2 weeks. Dinner plans, hotel bookings, private jokes about the architect. That's what she'd started calling me. Not Declan, just the architect. It was all there. Receipts, photos, a video of the same Ferrari from earlier, captioned, "Can't wait for tonight." I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in hand, the blue light reflecting off the engagement photo on the wall, the one where she'd been laughing under the palm trees. The next morning, I called the body shop to take my car in. The guy asked if it was a bad crash. I said it wasn't. But in truth, it had been the cleanest break of my life. I didn't call her. I didn't message her. I just waited to see if she'd show up. By noon, she hadn't. By sunset, she had posted a photo, a cocktail glass, her nails visible, the caption reading "New Beginnings." That's when I realized she hadn't been shocked at the light. She'd been caught. And even then, she hadn't looked sorry. She'd looked inconvenienced. I didn't know it yet, but that crash wasn't the worst thing that would happen that week. It was just the opening scene of a story that would take everything she built, the image, the comfort, the status, and grind it into dust. And the best part? I wouldn't have to lift a finger. The truth would do it for me. The next morning started like nothing had happened. The Miami sun cut through the blinds, lighting up the mess in the living room. Glass from the broken photo frame, an overturned chair, her purse still sitting there as if she'd just gone out for groceries. For a moment, I thought she might walk in and pretend it was all some misunderstanding. But she didn't. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Her phone, which I'd checked the night before, was gone. I went about my morning in silence, almost mechanically. Made coffee, checked emails, even responded to a contractor's message about a building permit. My body was on autopilot, but my mind replayed that scene on Ocean Drive, her turning around, seeing me, freezing, and still choosing him. By noon, I got the first notification, a $942 charge at the Seta Hotel, a luxury spot just 10 minutes from our apartment. The payment came from our joint card, the one we used for wedding expenses. The timestamp was from 2 nights before the crash. Then another charge followed, same hotel, next day, and another. 3 consecutive nights. I called the front desk pretending to confirm a reservation. The receptionist cheerfully confirmed that Ms. Connors had checked in under her name. That was all I needed. By 6 p.m., I was parked across from the hotel. The Ferrari was there, gleaming in the valet line. I didn't even need to see the plate. The same red paint, the same smug glint of luxury. I waited. Half an hour passed. Then she came out, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. The kind you buy for someone else's eyes, not your fiancé's. Brent walked beside her, relaxed, one hand in his pocket, the other on her back. They stopped for a moment while he handed the valet ticket to the attendant. She laughed, leaned into him. I'd seen her laugh like that before, but never in the past few months. I stepped out of my car, crossed the street, and stopped a few feet away. She turned at the sound of my footsteps. The look on her face wasn't guilt. It was panic. Before I could say a word, Brent stepped between us. His tone was calm, dismissive. Security noticed the tension and started walking over. Talia said something to them, and they redirected toward me. They asked me to leave. I didn't argue. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me thrown out. I just told her quietly that she'd left her engagement ring on the bathroom counter. Her expression flickered, just for a moment. Not regret, but fear. I turned and walked away while she tried to explain something to Brent. He looked annoyed now, not entertained like before. A small win, but not enough. That night, I drove to the beach. I sat in the car with the engine off, the sound of waves muffled by glass. I wasn't angry anymore. I was cold. Something in me had shifted, like a door that had been left open for too long finally slammed shut. By the time I got home, I knew what to do. The first step was the finances. I logged into our joint account and transferred everything into my personal one. I left her $200, just enough to make sure she'd notice. I canceled her credit card extensions, changed the access codes to the condo, and called a locksmith first thing in the morning. When the locksmith arrived, I told him it was a security issue. He changed the locks and handed me a new set of keys. I asked him to disable her digital entry pass. By the time he left, her key fob was useless. Later that afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." No name, but I knew the tone. I didn't respond. A few hours later, she showed up outside the building. The intercom buzzed, then her voice came through. Calm, but trembling. She said she wanted to explain. I let her up. Not because I needed answers, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go to save herself. When she walked in, she looked exhausted. Not from grief, from panic. Her eyes darted around, like she was checking to see if anything of hers was missing. She sat down, crossed her legs, and launched into a rehearsed story. Something about a mistake, confusion, closure. She insisted it was nothing serious, that Brent had reached out when she was lonely, and that it got complicated. I said nothing. She talked about wanting to fix things, to start fresh. She said she was scared that I'd left her with nothing. That's when it clicked. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she'd lost her safety net. I stood by the window while she spoke, watching traffic crawl down Collins Avenue. When she paused, waiting for a reaction, I just told her I'd sent her things to her parents' house. She froze. Then she stood up, pretending to stay composed, and said I was being unfair. That everyone makes mistakes. That we shouldn't throw away everything we've built. I almost laughed. She hadn't built anything. She'd decorated a life she thought she could inherit. She stormed out when I didn't answer. The elevator doors closed on her reflection. Perfect posture, perfect hair, but the mask was cracking. That night, her mother called. I didn't answer. Then her father called, and his message was short. Whatever happened between you two, handle it privately. The tone was sharp, protective, and condescending. The same tone he used when we first met. I knew Talia had already started rewriting the story. 2 days later, I found out just how much. A mutual friend, Paige, sent me screenshots from a group chat. Talia had told everyone I'd lost control and deliberately crashed in her out of jealousy. That I'd been emotionally unstable for months. She'd even implied that she was thinking of a restraining order. Reading those messages didn't hurt. They amused me. It was all too predictable. She wasn't just defending herself. She was already building a narrative to protect her image. But what she didn't realize was that Ocean Drive was lined with security cameras. That night, I called a friend who worked in property management for the city. I told him the date, the time, and the exact intersection. He didn't ask questions. The next morning, he sent me a link to the footage. It was perfect. Crystal clear video of her leaning into Brent, laughing, kissing him. Then my car entering the frame. The impact, the confusion, the crowd. No aggression, no shouting. Just her running to Brent's side and ignoring me completely. I watched it twice. Then I downloaded it. She wanted a narrative? I'd give her one. Just not the kind she could control. I didn't plan revenge that night. I just sat there and thought about how every action she took was about control, of perception, money, reputation. So if I was going to do anything, it wouldn't be for payback. It would be to take that control away. By the next morning, I had a plan. The footage wasn't going to social media. That would be too easy, too public. It would make her a victim. Instead, I'd send it where it actually mattered, her office. The place where she built her pristine image, where every interaction was about professionalism, respectability, and status. Her boss was her father's friend. Her colleagues adored her. They thought she was perfect. They were about to see who she really was. When I hit send, attaching the video with no message, no caption, just the file name, intersection footage, I felt nothing. Not anger. Not triumph. Just calm. The kind of calm you feel after watching a storm roll past, knowing the destruction isn't yours to fix, but also knowing it's deserved. And I knew this was only the beginning. The footage spread through her office like spilled gasoline. It started with a whisper, a forwarded email, a private message, an accidental reply all. By noon, the HR department had it. By 2 p.m., so did her father. That day, I didn't have to do anything. The dominoes fell on their own. Talia worked for a high-end design consultancy tied to corporate real estate developers, including one of my firm's major clients. Her role was client relations, the polished face of her father's network. She knew everyone. Her reputation was spotless. That was her currency. At first, she must have thought she could contain it, pretend it was some misunderstanding or even deep fake manipulation. But the video was too clean, too obviously real. It had sound. The Ferrari's engine, her laughter, the moment she kissed him, then me crashing into them. There was no way to deny it. By 4 p.m., I got the first call from a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. The second one came 10 minutes later. Then another. I finally picked up around 5 p.m., expecting her, but it was her father. He didn't yell. His voice was cold, precise, like a man speaking through clenched teeth. He asked me why I'd done it. I said nothing. He paused, then told me Talia was suspended pending an internal review for ethical misconduct. When I asked what that meant, he hung up. That night, the silence in the condo felt different, cleaner. I walked through the rooms she'd once filled with color-coded planners, flower samples, and open laptops. The wedding binder was gone. The only trace of her was the faint scent of her perfume on the curtains. I opened my laptop and checked my email. There were already industry whispers, a project cancellation here, a delay there. My firm's client list overlapped with her company's. What happened to her wasn't just personal now. It was professional fallout. But I hadn't yet realized the depth of it, or how Brent fit into the picture. The next day, my business partner, Owen, came into my office early. He looked unsettled, carrying a folder. "Do you know who that guy was?" he asked. I nodded. "Her ex." "What?" He dropped the folder on my desk. Inside were printed emails, contracts, and proposals. The company Brent represented, Sundale Ventures, was one of the bidders for a design contract we'd been shortlisted for 6 weeks ago, a deal worth nearly $2 million. At the time, Sundale had presented surprisingly accurate cost estimates for our project. Too accurate. Numbers that only someone with insider access could have known. It made sense now. Talia had been working both sides, sharing details from our proposals with him, helping his firm undercut us. She wasn't just cheating emotionally. She was financially sabotaging me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Carla. She'd handled a few confidentiality disputes for me before. I laid everything out, the footage, the timeline, the contracts, the overlapping bids. She read through it quietly, her expression tightening. "This isn't just a breakup," she said finally. "This is breach of contract. If she shared proprietary material, it's actionable." I told her I didn't want to drag it out in court, but I wanted protection, something that would make her think twice before trying to flip the narrative again. Carla drafted a notice letter to both her company and her father's firm, outlining potential conflicts of interest and NDA violations. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning, one written in legal language sharp enough to bleed without cutting. By the end of the week, her silence became louder than any confrontation could have been. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't show up. But others did. Paige, the mutual friend who'd shown me the group chat earlier, sent another message. She's saying she's being framed. That someone planted the footage. I didn't bother replying. I was too busy watching everything crumble from a distance. The next Monday, I received an email from a client in New York, one who'd been working with Talia's firm for years. He wanted to pause our collaboration indefinitely. The reason was vague, but polite. I knew what it meant. Her father's company was pulling strings, trying to bury the story before it dragged their reputation down further. But it was too late. The footage had circulated outside the company now. Someone had leaked it to a gossip site that covered Miami's upper business circles. Nothing explicit, just a short article about a high-profile affair causing internal disruption between two real estate firms. Names weren't printed, but anyone in our network could fill in the blanks. Within 48 hours, her father resigned from 2 advisory boards. Brent's company went silent online. Their website disappeared. I didn't leak anything else. I didn't need to. That Friday, I got a text from Talia. No greeting. No apology. Just, "Can we talk?" I ignored it. 2 hours later, she was outside my office building. She waited near the entrance, sunglasses on, phone in hand. I walked past her without stopping. She followed me halfway to the parking lot before saying quietly that she didn't mean for it to go that far. When I turned to face her, she looked like a stranger. Hair tied back, no makeup, eyes red but dry. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for what she'd lost. She said Brent had been using her, that he'd promised to invest in a side project if she helped him get access to certain clients, that she never expected me to find out this way. I told her it didn't matter. The damage was done. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. She said if I cared at all about her, I'd retract the legal notice. Her firm was considering termination with cause, which meant she'd lose her benefits, her severance, everything. I didn't answer. I just looked at her for a long time, realizing that the person in front of me wasn't the woman I'd planned to marry. She was someone who treated love like a transaction. When I finally spoke, I told her that if she wanted to rebuild anything, she should start by facing the consequences. She left without another word. Over the weekend, Owen received a call from Brent's assistant. Sundale Ventures had withdrawn from the project entirely. Rumor was Brent had been fired after an internal audit found irregularities in his proposals. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from Talia's company's legal department. It confirmed her termination for breach of confidentiality and reputational misconduct. No apology, no admission, just cold formality. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't. It felt inevitable, like gravity. The next day, I saw a post from her on social media, a photo of a plane wing, captioned "starting over." She was leaving Miami. Good. But I also knew people like her never really disappear. They circle back when you least expect them, when they need something again. So I saved everything. The footage, the letters, the proof, and locked it all away. Not for revenge. For insurance. Because if there's one thing I'd learned from her, It's that people who live by manipulation don't stop when they lose. They just wait for another opening. And I wasn't about to give her one. What I didn't realize was that her story wasn't finished yet. Not for her, not for Brent, and definitely not for me. The fallout had only begun, and soon, everything she'd built on deception was going to collapse in public under her own name. Talia's name appeared in a press release 3 weeks later, not in the gossip columns this time, but buried deep inside the local business section of the Miami Herald. It was a small paragraph announcing her immediate departure from Connors and Vale Consulting due to conflicts of interest involving client data. The phrasing was cold, factual, and permanent. In her world, that single paragraph was a scar. I hadn't needed to push it. Once her firm realized the extent of her involvement with Brent, they took care of the cleanup themselves. It turned out Brent's company had been using several of her internal drafts and even a partial prototype for one of our architectural designs, a clear breach of contract. The investigation spread fast. When Brent realized he was about to take the fall alone, he did what opportunists always do. He turned on her. According to Owen, who'd heard it through a contractor, Brent handed over emails, voice messages, and chat logs that tied Talia directly to the leak. He even provided bank transfers, small consulting fees he'd sent her during their affair. That was the final nail. Her father's firm couldn't protect her anymore without implicating themselves. 2 days later, she was fired formally, with full documentation of misconduct. When I read the report that my lawyer forwarded, 27 pages of internal communication, timestamps, and signatures, I realized that if I'd stayed quiet, she would have kept going. The whole engagement, the relationship, it had never been about us. It was a business plan disguised as love. After her dismissal, the silence stretched. No calls, no texts. Even Paige, the mutual friend, stopped mentioning her. The city swallowed her name like it had never existed. Then, one night, about a month later, I got a knock at the door. It was Brent. He stood in the hallway, thinner than before, his tan gone, suit rumpled. He didn't look confident anymore. He looked cornered. He said he'd lost everything. His position, his investors, even his license pending review. His lawyer had advised him to settle the matter privately with everyone involved before the lawsuits started flying. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a signed affidavit admitting to unauthorized access to confidential design data and naming Talia as his collaborator. It was everything Carla could have asked for. I asked why he was giving it to me. He said, quietly, "Because she told me you'd forgive her." That line stayed with me longer than it should have. I thanked him, shut the door, and stood there for a long time. For a second, I imagined what kind of conversations they'd had about me, how she described me, how she probably laughed about how predictable I was. That night, I opened a bottle of whiskey and sat on the balcony overlooking the bay. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of salt and rain. Below, the city lights reflected off the water like 1,000 tiny fires. I thought about what revenge was supposed to feel like. People assume it's electric, euphoric, that sudden rush of justice. But it wasn't. It was slow, quiet, and strangely hollow. It felt like watching a bridge collapse from a distance, knowing you built the foundation and they were the ones who weakened it. Still, there was satisfaction in the stillness. The next morning, Carla submitted Brent's affidavit to the firm's legal department. They reached a settlement within a week. My company got the contract we'd been competing for, the same one Brent had tried to steal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Owen and I flew to New York to finalize the deal. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without replaying the crash, the argument, the betrayal. Miami became quieter when I got back. Fewer calls, fewer social invitations. The people who'd once called me lucky when I got engaged to her now avoided the subject entirely. No one wanted to pick sides when the truth was already public. Then came the unexpected message, an email from her father. He didn't apologize. He simply wrote that Talia had made mistakes she's struggling to recover from, and that he hoped I would move on with dignity. He also requested that I refrain from further distribution of any material related to the case. It was phrased politely, but I could hear the panic behind the formality. I forwarded it to Carla. She said not to worry, they had no leverage. The settlement was already binding, and the footage had already served its purpose. That weekend, I listed the condo for sale. It sold faster than expected. The couple who bought it were newlyweds. Watching them sign the papers felt like closing a chapter one should have never started. When I packed the last box, I found a drawer full of things she'd left behind. Makeup, a few cards, her old planner. Inside the planner, tucked between the pages of venue photos, was a folded note addressed to me. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. It wasn't an apology. It was a confession of fear. She wrote that she never meant to fall into it, that she'd wanted security first, then love later. She thought Brent could give her both. When he couldn't, she said, she realized she destroyed the one person who would have forgiven her. That was the line that stood out, the assumption that I would have forgiven her. I burned the letter in the sink and watched the ashes circle the drain. 2 months later, I moved to Austin. My firm expanded there after landing the New York contract. New city, new skyline, no ghosts. I built a small house near the river, minimalist, clean, all glass and concrete. It was the kind of place she would have called soulless. I like that about it. Sometimes, when I sat on the porch at night, I thought about Ocean Drive, the sound of screeching tires, the smell of burning rubber, the look on her face when she realized who was behind the wheel. That memory used to sting. Now it just existed, like a photo from another life. But life, as it always does, has a way of circling back. About a year later, I returned to Miami for a conference. I stayed in a hotel downtown, not far from where everything had started. One afternoon, walking along the strip near Ocean Drive, I saw her. She was cleaning tables outside a small beach cafe, hair tied up, wearing a faded uniform. For a moment, I wasn't sure it was her. She looked smaller somehow, quieter. She noticed me. Our eyes met briefly, and she froze, tray in hand. Then she looked away, pretending to wipe something from a table. I could have stopped, could have said something, but there was nothing left to say. I walked past, and in that brief silence, something settled inside me. The final piece of closure I didn't know I was still waiting for. Not triumph, not pity, just peace. When I got back to the hotel, I ordered a drink and sat by the window watching the traffic below. Ocean Drive shimmered in the distance, loud, crowded, alive as ever. The city had moved on. So had I. The story that began with a crash ended not in chaos, but in stillness. She'd lost everything she built through deception. I'd kept everything she tried to take. And the truth, the quiet, undeniable truth, was that justice hadn't come through revenge. It had come through patience, through silence. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't destroy someone. It's let them destroy themselves. And that's exactly what she did.